My name is Amy Seidman. I'm here with Noble Profit. I'm the founder of Noble Profit, and we've been building a technology called BFlow. It's actually a separate project from Noble Profit in the sense that it's being designed with the intention for open source, and it's all around sustainability, information, and assets, and creating reputation as well as secure information and the ability to understand whether it's verified and enable all voices. And there's a relationship that I've been seeing around AI and Web3 that I think is very important. And so I figured today I would talk about that. So here we go. Share my screen. And so Noble Profit is an information and technology company transforming the flow of resources to solve our greatest challenges. And what does that mean? So basically, if you look at the world and all of the information transpiring around ESGs, sustainable development goals, around climate, and the money and the flow of resources, we've had a tremendous divestment. And through the journey, we've learned, you got to inspire people through their heart. Here we are talking about Web3 and we're talking about AI and all this like geeky data stuff. And why did NFTs take off? They took off because people can relate to them. They're images, they're things that they can intangibly touch with their eyes, with their emotions, and how it might emote a feeling when we look at visuals. And we learned that educating through data is very important. But taking action from technology, using technology to take action is part of how we're going to 10x or 10 times the adoption of these different solutions. When we saw email come into the scene, it 10x communication. 10 times the number of communications were possible because of BCCC, because of BCC and CC all, where before we would have to send a letter in the mail and literally make a physical copy. So the expectation of our communication has also amped up. We're now dealing with lots and lots of pieces of information coming towards us. And if we look at the transgression, kind of how did this flow of technology evolve? Obviously it didn't start right away with computing. It started with transportation, with the steam engine, and then moving into, electricity and all of the different adoption of how, if you want to go way back, you go to the wheel in prehistoric life. But when we start to really look at the curve that occurred with computing and intelligence, it coincides with the curve of climate change. It's really, a sharp curve. And we are in a place where we're dealing with this climate crisis. We have this incredible revolution that's happening around information. And at the same time, there's many nefarious actors that are manipulating information, and we just don't know what's true. So we have tremendous capacity to solve a lot of problems. We have a tremendous amount of fear around how this is going to affect our lives. And I think that there's a space for Web3 and digital identities to help equalize that. And I feel it's very, very important. So we're applying Web3 from the standpoint of creating attestation and truth and addressing some of the issues. But when we start to look at the data landscape and we're looking at synthetic fakes, all the different kinds of disconnected information, and the fact that we cannot measure things, then we can't manage them. We can't deploy capital in areas that we don't know how effective they are. And then when you're in a space where there's a huge money grab, we've seen in blockchain a lot of fraud. We've seen a lot of misuse of funds. And that is just a drop in the ocean when we start to look at what's happening in the climate space. There is, I think, a lot more legitimacy around certain projects, but there's also a huge money grab. We also don't know what is true. We have very opposed political landscapes, and money is only going to things with proven results. So when you look at society and you look at how we're going to solve all these great problems, they need transparency, but then you have all these people who don't want to be transparent. And then you have certain situations where it just doesn't make sense. So there is a dance happening between trusted information, trusted identities, autonomy, privacy, all of these different things are kind of hitting right up against each other, causing ripples where we're unable to really figure out how to deploy this capital and also what is truth. So we need these digital anchors of truth to address the missing trouble, the missing trust, the disconnected information, and really our greatest challenges can be great opportunities. And what we're looking at from a problem side is we have a lot of global pressure, immediacy, the climate crisis. We're all dealing with weather. We're all, sweating in our houses over the summer, and we have tornadoes happening in San Diego, and we have, incredible fires happening all over the world. We have global regulations which are clamping down to address the flow of these resources. We're missing the tools. And that evolves into disconnected information. Similarly, on the other side, we have this missing trust. It's very expensive. There's a lot of unverified information. A lot of things are self-proclaimed, and it's extremely inconsistent. So also we have disconnection. And I believe that we can solve a lot of these problems very quickly, but it makes a very complicated space. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up creating a molecule, data driven, that is around essentially a container for data to enable impact and sustainability proof of reputation. So it's a protocol, and it's also, we're building a stack of tools around that. So we've built a number of tools. I'm not going to get too deep. This isn't a pitch. It's really about the things that we learned along the journey in modeling thousands of use cases, many pilots, early customers, all of that. We have come to the conclusion that shared intelligence and truth for all stakeholders is the way to go. Otherwise, we're just going to reproduce the same system with a different bunch of mechanisms happening, where we'll have AI and robots running things, where we had stockbrokers and, wealth managers and folks who were doing the business. And I think with this, we can create the levers that we need to involve all people. And when I say all people, we have 50 million slaves in the world right now, in the clothing that we're wearing, in our privileged homes, with these computers and our devices, the cobalt in those devices, enabling us to communicate, in our food systems. There are a lot of people who are not doing so well because we're doing so well. And that doesn't need to happen. And similarly, we are stealing from our future generations. We don't know what's going to be happening in the next 20, 30 years in terms of biodiversity and pollinators and our food systems, as well as I was at an event last night with a woman who has been working with refugees, and there's an estimate of hundreds of millions of people being displaced by flooding and climate in the Africa and India regions. So, in those continents. So we are facing unprecedented issues for what enjoyment we're having today. And it doesn't need to be that way. We have plenty, and nature is generative. Nature, you have an apple tree. One apple tree will produce many apples over and over. And if we start to design our systems in continuity with this, 4.5 billion years of knowledge, which actually this is influence. I just want to credit Gil Friend from Natural Logic for this kind of quote. It's, nature has all the wisdom that we need to really pattern and look at how to design these systems. So it's really about having shared intelligence. And when you're looking in a forest of information, you're looking in the forest, there's a thing called mycelium, and mycelium is a nervous system beneath the trees that enable the trees to kind of know what's happening on the other side of the forest. Are all the trees being burned or eaten, and they can start to produce tannins. And so it's information sharing, it's nutrient sharing, and we need that. So if you look here and you see this big tree, it could be a Google, or it could be a JP Morgan, or it could be a Nestle, or some very large company, and they're siloed from everybody else and all their vendors, all the denizens of the forest. So we're creating this connective tissue. That's a piece that I think is very important, how we bring that together. And examples of this are different pilots that we've done. We've modeled new market tax credits with Wells Fargo. which is basically how did the Sustainable Development Goals apply to the different loans that they're giving. These are forgivable loans to opportunity zones. So they're intentional loans to help communities come out of poverty or address different issues that they're needing to address. Similarly, on the flip side of finance, we've been working with Amazon Watch on a program they have called Complicity and Destruction. And there is, evidence of very large financiers directly investing in burning down the forests and mining and creating oil spills within rivers that are the only water source for indigenous people, as well as, some of the land grab that's happening down in Central America and South America. And similarly in business, we've modeled both the happy, perfect supply chain of Indigenous Designs, a wonderful clothing company that has, organic fiber with nuclear family businesses of artisans, where they're bringing people out of poverty. They're enabling people to have their own, workforce, and they're seeing people going, sending their kids to school and buying refrigerators, which are the benchmarks of bringing people out of poverty is, do you have electricity? Do you have something to cool your home? And similarly, we did the Uyghurs, which is an unfortunate group in Asia that are, I don't know if I need to get into the geopolitical part, but there's, 1 million people that are in forced labor situations working on cotton. And so there's been a massive divestment from this cotton by big apparel brands. But how do you know that cotton hasn't moved to Thailand? So these are big problems that we can solve. Similarly, how do we add circularity, the creation of new fibers from old fibers? Similarly, we looked at CSR. Bay Area Green Tours is a wonderful group. They do team building with very large tech companies in the Bay Area. And one of the really cool use cases, I think, that came out of some of the studies that we did was LinkedIn took their people on a team building tour to learn about local food systems for food waste. And they ended up purchasing a lot of the food for their employees from the local businesses. So these are transformational types of things, whether on the dark side or on the light side, and how we deploy our resources can really make a difference. And people want to buy things from companies that are good. We want to work for people who are in organizations that are good. And investors really want to be investing in companies that are actually doing things that are positive instead of negative. So there's a huge amount of pressure for this information. And part of the learning I want to give is a sense of where did I learn about a lot of this stuff? And I shot a media series of 220 videos around clean tech impact and sustainable business of some of the biggest companies in the world, the investors in, what are products that are now coming out on the marketplace, battery systems, vehicles, transportation systems. And it was evident that there is such a great business opportunity to being sustainable. And the companies that were leading the pack are the most sustainable in these downturns. So when you have the big downturns in the economy, these are the companies that are surviving because they have gone through and looked at optimizing all of their systems in a way that makes them independent of conflicts, geopolitical conflicts and supply chain issues, because they're addressing these things. And so when we look at this intersection, it's really important to kind of look at all people. And so this is sort of the place, just because it's clean tech doesn't mean it's not going to affect people's lives in other places in the world. Similarly, this interconnectivity that we have with one another, I think, can be expressed in data. And when we start looking at all the fake data, we can start to see a triangulation that can occur with digital identities and Web3 that I believe will solve the deep fake portion of the problem that we're not the deep fake, but the synthetic identities. And similarly, potentially deep fake, we would know who that person is from that organization. And when we look at like the Eli Lilly blue checkmark stock drop that happened when Twitter was giving out, you're able to buy the blue checkmark, there were some incredible ramifications on the marketplace. And so attaching and understanding whether the information is true by creating a pin in that information with a digital identity and with a third-party verification is paramount. Now, that is quite contradictory to the Web3 space. So these are just some of the tools that we've been developing. But we're creating kind of logic out of chaos, applying that to the digital information and the assets, and triangulating that to these different sustainable development goals, the ESGs, the climate attestation. And these are some of the different launch groups and technologies that we're using, organizations that we're working with. And throughout all of this, it's, there's a lot of goodwill out there. There's a lot of wonderful people and technology that's evolving. But what we need to do is actually in a little bit in a conflict of the trustless, anonymity that we're seeing, on Twitter. And we need to come together and bring this collective action so we can meet our climate goals. So if we keep arguing about it, I think it's a delicate dance between protecting someone's privacy and enabling, if your company, knowing it's that company that's saying that. And I think that's the place that we can kind of bring it all together and we can gamify. So the invitation I have for corporations and finance groups is join our transparency consortium and let's gamify sustainability. So thank you, Mariana. I appreciate the time to be able to share this with you. If anyone wants to contact me, there's a contact link on bflow.io, and you can just hit contact. That's where our tech is, or nobleprofit.com. Again, send a contact, say you would like to join our transparency consortium, and we'll send you an invitation. But we're inviting people to use our tech in the very early stages to help create that initial transparency model.